Hello, and welcome to Lifespan Development Psychology. My name is Matthew Poole, and I'm an instructor of psychology at Northeast State Community College. And today we're going over Chapter 8, Early Adulthood. So let's talk about the physical development in early adulthood. So when it comes to the developmental task of young adults, this includes achieving autonomy, establishing identity, developing emotional stability, establishing a career, finding intimacy, becoming part of a group or community, establishing a residence and learning how to manage a household, becoming a parent and rearing children, making marital or relationship adjustments and learning to parent. As far as the physical development in early adulthood as a continuation, the body completes its growth, but the brain continues to develop. Okay, and so we've talked about in previous classes how, especially your frontal lobe, does not fully develop until about the mid-20s. So the reproductive system, the motor ability, strength, and lung capacity are operating at their best, but will start a slow and gradual decline by the mid to late 30s. So habits established in our 20s are related to health conditions in middle age, particularly the risk of heart disease. And American men and women with moderate weight gain from early to middle adulthood have significantly increased risk of major chronic disease and mortality. Okay. And early adulthood tends to be a time of relatively good health. So we need to make sure to maintain this and take care of ourselves, because what we do in our 20s and our 30s are crucial for down the road as far as the onset of major chronic diseases, especially related to cardiovascular health, among others. Okay. So continuing with physical development, the leading cause of death for both age groups 15 to 24 years and 25 to 34 in the United States are unintentional injury, suicide, and homicide, followed by cancer and heart disease. Okay, so rates of violent death are influenced largely by substance abuse. And youth transitioning into adulthood have some of the highest rates of alcohol and substance abuse. Drugs impair judgment, reduce inhibitions, and alter mood, all of which can lead to dangerous behaviors such as reckless driving, violent altercations, and forced sexual encounters. And drug and alcohol use also increase the risk of sexually transmitted infections due to the increase of engagement in risky sexual behavior when under the influence, because especially when it comes to alcohol, there are these reduced inhibitions. You may know what you're engaging in, but you really don't care as much. Okay. Now let's look at the cognitive development in early adulthood. Okay, so thinking abstractly is one characteristic of adult thought, and post-formal thought is practical, realistic, and individualistic, but also characterized by understanding the complexities of various perspectives. So Perry notes that cognition tends to shift from dualism, aka black and white thinking, to multiplicity, which includes some problems are solvable and some answers not yet known, to relativism, the importance of the context in knowledge. Okay. So education and work. About 1/3 of American adult population has a bachelor's degree or higher today, compared to less than 5% in 1940, which is great because we're becoming more educated, and that increases about 10% of the population, a little bit more, will vary as time goes on, probably to a higher percentage, but about 10% of the population has a master's degree, and then around 1 to 2% of the population has a doctorate or professional doctorate degree. So educational attainment rates vary by gender and race, but the rising costs of higher education have raised questions about whether college is worth the cost. Now, for students who are taking me at the college setting, I teach at a community college, so the the benefits of attending a community college are that it is more cost effective, and you're still getting a great education. It's not like the quality of the education is less, and especially for those first 2 years at a community college, you're taking your general education credits anyways. And if you live in a state that's similar to Tennessee, we have agreements in place where our credits must transfer to our state universities. And we have great relationships with local private institutions where they are very good about accepting our credit. So they're still, at the end of the day, going to get their bachelor's degree from their respective institution, but they got it at a lower cost thanks to attending a community college first. But the question still remains about whether college is worth it or not, because especially when it comes to private institutions, I'm not trying to call them out necessarily, but I guess I am in a way. The costs of these private institutions are just enormous nowadays. And you got to think, is that bachelor's degree in, varying subjects outside of, engineering, nursing, among others, is it truly worth it for the amount of debt you have to go in? This is a good class discussion that we may have, and you're welcome to have that discussion in the comments. But I worry about the future of higher education in that if we price people out of it, it's not going to. I'm going to be curious about how that percentage of bachelor's degree attainment will vary, because of course we have a high attainment. 1/3 of the population has that bachelor's degree, but what is that going to look like? I don't know. I really don't. And so there remains a question also about the connection between higher education and the workplace, and whether formal education prepares young adults for work. That's another great example as well. Does your bachelor's degree really, or your degree in general, really prepare you for the workforce? I think that's why a lot of internships are encouraged throughout, so you can actually get that hands-on learning and realize what your future career is going to look like. I know a lot of bachelor degree programs have it embedded to where they have to do an internship to get that experience. And so that works twofold, to have that experience, but also on your resume, but also to see what the day-to-day is going to look like in your future career. Okay, so soft skills as well as the particular knowledge and skills in a college major are important, especially because they prepare adults to continually learn new things and adapt creatively in their careers and lives. So learning doesn't just stop at whenever you obtain your degree. It is a lifelong process, and that's what college prepares you for. And Holland proposed that there are 6 personality types: realistic, investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, and conventional, as well as varying types of work environments. So let's look at some theories of early adulthood psychosocial development. So, of course, during this stage as well, it's a continuation of the intimacy versus isolation stage, where we are establishing, we either go in the direction of establishing those intimate relationships with people, or we may tend to go in the form of isolation. So intimacy involves caring about another and sharing oneself without losing oneself. And the developmental crisis of intimacy versus isolation is impacted by how identity versus role confusion is resolved, with intimate relationships more difficult if one is still struggling with identity. According to Erickson, having some sense of identity is essential for intimate relationships. And in our 20s, intimacy needs may be met in friendships rather than with partners, especially as many young adults postpone making long-term commitments to partners. That's very evident in today's world, where we understand that we're living longer, but also things are really expensive. And so taking on those commitments like a partner and children are delayed because of our economic state, as well as we understand that we have significant longevity in regard to our life expectancy. So we don't need to jump into these long-term commitments immediately like potentially our grandparents or our great-grandparents did by getting married and having children at 18. Maybe even younger. So friendships between men are more likely to involve sharing information, providing solutions, or a focus on activities, while friendships between women are more likely to focus on sharing weaknesses, emotions, or problems. Differences in friendship approaches can lead to problems with men and women come together. So with emerging adulthood, this is kind of a relatively new concept as far as lifespan development psychology, because there's been this transition to delaying commitments, and people want to go to school. A lot of what ways, we have to go to school longer just to achieve the career that we want to. So that's going to delay, commitments to partners, children, the workforce, etc. And so this theory of emerging adulthood proposes that a new life stage has arisen between adolescence and young adulthood over the past half century. So therefore, a higher proportion of young people than ever before pursue education and training beyond secondary school, making the early 20s a time of immense job instability, especially in the 20s. We're all figuring ourselves out. And for myself, as I make this video, I'm depending on the year you're watching, I'm maybe much older, but right now I'm in my later 20s. And so I can attest to this of, going to school to get my master's degree, delaying a lot of gratification, delaying the workforce as far as getting to where I'm at now. I've held a number of different jobs in my 20s, and, ever since I got my job in my as a professor in my mid-20s, mid to late 20s, I guess you could consider it. I got my full-time job at the age of 26 as a college instructor. But before that, I had a number of different jobs until that point. But now I am going to be solidified in this position, I hope, for a long period of time. But before that was a significant time of instability and just trying to find my place in the world. And so there are 5 features that distinguish emerging adulthood: identity exploration, instability as mentioned, self-focus, feeling in between adolescence and adulthood. That is normal. You're going to feel, if you are a traditionally aged student, typically between the ages of 18 to 20 for college, as far as coming directly from high school. It's okay to feel like sometimes you still feel like a child, and in some cases you feel like an adult. So you feel like you're in between. Okay, and you have a sense of broad possibilities for the future. You have these ideas of what you'd like to happen for your life. Okay, and emerging adults are still in the process of obtaining an education, like I said, are unmarried and are childless. I can attest to that comparatively to my grandparents who were married at 18 versus myself. I got married at 25, which is still, in today's perspective, considered pretty early comparatively. So these same emerging adulthood features have been seen outside the United States and other economically developed countries. Now let's talk about attraction and love. Very important topic. So how do we find the people that we eventually want to settle down with or have long-term commitments with? So psychologists have identified a number of variables such as similarity, proximity, familiarity, and reciprocity. So with proximity, it's a physical nearness. So that's been found to be a significant factor in the development of relationships. Obviously, when you're around people more, you're more likely to have long-term commitments to them, and allows people the opportunity to get to know one another and discover similarities. Now, with the creation of online dating through apps and other forums, this has broadened our horizon. So it's not just about proximity anymore. I think there needs to be some updating because with the internet and technology, it allows us to meet people that, 100 years or even 50 years ago, or even sooner, we wouldn't have met otherwise. But as far as for myself, I can definitely say the reason for my long-term commitment was due to proximity or going to the same college. So familiarity also increases the likelihood of attraction, as we, naturally tend to feel safe with familiar people. The mere exposure effect argues that the more we are exposed to a stimulus, the more likely we are to view it positively. Now, with similarity, that's also an important factor for attraction and love. People tend to marry those or stay committed to those who are very similar when it comes to the age, social class, race, education, physical attractiveness, values, and attitudes, also known as the matching hypothesis. We tend to settle down with people who are similar to us in those factors. As well as reciprocity, which is based on the notion that we're more likely to like somebody if they feel the same way towards us, obviously. Okay, attraction and love continued. So Sternberg focused on the notion that all types of love are comprised of 3 distinct areas: intimacy, passion, and commitment. So intimacy includes caring, closeness, and emotional support. Passion is comprised of physiological and emotional arousal, and commitment refers to the cognitive process and decision to commit to love another person and willingness to work to keep that love over the course of your life. So, anthropologist Helen Fisher scanned the brains of people who had just fallen in love and observed that their brain chemistry was similar to the brain of an addict on a drug high. Of course, you've got all of those feel good chemicals circulating, such as dopamine and serotonin. So, that first fresh love in that initial or puppy dog phase, I guess you could call it, there's this all sorts of flood of dopamine and serotonin. And so when a person experiences a breakup, the brain processes it, get this, similar to quitting a heroin habit. That is an incredible insight. I mean, that is, a heartbreak. It isn't just psychologically and emotionally difficult, but the brain we call it a heartbreak because there can be a physical response to it as well. Now, let's talk about engagement in marriage as a continuation. So, education also appears to be a strong filter people use to help select a mate, as well as compatibility, physical attractiveness, and proximity. So, according to the filter theory of mate selection, the pool of eligible partners becomes narrower as it passes through filters used to eliminate members of the pool. And some cultures practice arranged marriages when the families of young people do the work of finding a mate. So, how do you feel about that? How would you feel about your parents selecting a mate for you? Do you think that they would do a good job? Okay, so with parenting, families are increasingly postponing or not having children, as mentioned. As the age of first marriage has increased, so has the age at which people become parents. And this is due to a number of things: educational attainment, the economy, understanding of our longevity, things like that. And in previous classes, we've talked about the difference between authoritative versus authoritarian parents. So you should be well versed with this, but just as a quick refresher, the authoritative parenting style is both demanding and supportive of the child. And demandingness really refers to the degree a parent controls a child's behavior. So authoritative parents are very much warm to the child. They provide those limits, those guidelines. And the key mark thing is that they allow you to utilize your voice when reflecting, or I would say arguing what it is that you ultimately want. You may not get what you want every single time, but they're at least willing to listen to your perspective. So if you've done well, you've abided by their limitations or restrictions, maybe you can increase that curfew by 15 to 30 minutes. Whereas your authoritarian parents, these parents are low in support and high in demandingness. So I always say authoritarian equals dictarian equals dictatorship. Okay, so the parent tends to act like a dictator, my way or the highway. Okay. Now, again, parenting continued. As a quick refresher, your permissive parents, they are like the cool parents. They're high in support and low in demandingness. So that, these parents tend to say yes to the child a lot in order to be their friend rather than their parent or their guide, or authority figure, I should say. And so what may tend to happen as a result is these children will get out into the world and they'll have this confidence about them, or even a level of cockiness, and they are met into a world where, they're not going to get told yes every single time, either by their professors, their bosses, and even in law enforcement, okay? So this may get them into some sticky situations and they have to readjust quickly. Now, your uninvolved parenting style, as I mentioned, they're both low in support and demandingness. So in this regard, if they are within the house, it's as good as if they weren't even there to begin with, because they don't set any guidelines, any expectations. No warmth is given to the child. So it's very just, as mentioned in the word, uninvolved. Okay. So let's look at the changing face of parenthood. So in Galinsky's stages, the image-making stage is first here. So this is planning for a child or pregnancy. They consider what is meant to be what it means to be a parent, and plan for changes to accommodate a child. The nurturing stage, which happens during intimacy, this is whenever the main task is to develop an attachment relationship with the child and adapt to the new baby. In the authority stage, during toddler and preschool, the parents create rules and really figure out how to effectively guide their child's behavior. In the interpretive stage, which happens during middle childhood, the parent helps their child interpret their experiences with the social world beyond the family. In the interdependent stage, which happens during adolescence, parents renegotiate their relationship with their adolescent children to allow for shared power in decision making. And then in the departure stage, which happens in early adulthood, parents evaluate their successes and failures as parents. So that is going to conclude this chapter of lifespan development psychology. I hope to see you in the next one for chapter 9, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.